On November 2nd, 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour, wrote a letter that would set off a conflict still being fought more than 100 years later.
His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object.
When Balfour wrote of his government's intent to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, 90% of the people living there were not Jewish. Just 31 years later, most of them were gone.
כמה אתה חושב אנשים הרגת ככה?
לא ספרתי. אני לא יכול לדעת בחיי. היה לי מקלע עם 250 כדורים.
This is the story of the British promise that led to the destruction of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel. Let's start with the obvious question. Why were the British making promises about other people's countries? The short answer, empire is one hell of a drug. This was World War I, and the British were making lots of promises. In addition to promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine, they promised Arab leaders independence if they rose up against Britain's enemy, the Ottoman Empire. The Arabs did. Hollywood even made a movie about it.
Arabia's for the Arabs now. That's what I've told them anyway. That's what they think. That's why they're fighting.
Oh, surely.
A month after Balfour's letter, British troops took Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. The people who lived there were Arabs, mostly Muslims, but there were Christian and Jewish minorities too. There was also a tiny number of European Jews who in the late 1800s had started building small colonies there. At a time when many Jews were suffering horrific persecution in Europe, they felt Palestine could be an escape. The idea of building up a Jewish presence in Palestine became known as Zionism, but it stayed a fringe movement among European Jews. Many of them felt they shouldn't have to leave their countries to avoid persecution. But Zionism as a political movement took a big step forward with an Austrian man called Theodor Herzl. And this guy is a very important name in this story. In 1896, he published Der Judenstaat, or in English, The Jewish State. In it, he said the only way for Jews to avoid Europe's anti-Semitism was not just to leave, but to have their own country. And Herzl didn't just write. The next year, he organized a conference in Basel, Switzerland, the first Zionist Congress. The attendees agreed on a program which sought, among other things, to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine and promote Jewish settlement in Palestine. From here on out, the Zionist movement became very active, setting up funds to promote Jewish immigration to Palestine, companies to buy land there, and recruiting representatives to advocate for their cause with different governments. A few days after the conference, Herzl wrote this in his diary.
At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. In 5 years perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it.
He was only off by 1 year. Okay, so that is a lot of history, but it's important because the Zionist movement is a critical part of the story going forward, especially after it found a friend in the British government, where a lot of high-ranking officials supported Zionism, sometimes for unexpected reasons. Prime Minister Lloyd George, for example, was a Christian zealot who believed gathering the Jewish people in Palestine would bring Jesus Christ back to earth. Others, like Balfour, believed that getting the Jewish people out of Europe and into their own country would be a good thing. Herzl was pretty visionary when he wrote that the anti-Semitic nations will become our allies. Meanwhile, the Zionists assured Britain that their future country would be a reliable ally. So that's the backstory of how European anti-Semitism, Zionism, and British imperialism all led to the Balfour Declaration, this British promise to build a homeland for Jews in Palestine. Now we're going to look at how Britain did that. World War I had been a conflict between rival empires, and the winners set up the League of Nations to distribute the losing side's territories between them. They called it the Mandate System, putting territories once controlled by the Ottoman and German empires under the, quote, tutelage of advanced nations until they became independent. Britain was given the mandate over Palestine, but the Palestinian people were never asked what they wanted or what independence would look like to them. Listen to what Balfour wrote to one of his colleagues.
For in Palestine we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country.
Instead, it was the Zionists who were consulted about what their vision for Palestine was, and so the mandate ended up incorporating not just the Balfour Declaration, but several clauses requiring Britain to ensure the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine. British rule was very accommodating to the Zionist project. The Jewish community in Palestine grew with big waves of immigration. They had their own schools and factories and even their own militia, the Haganah, and they were led by the Polish-born David Ben-Gurion, the leader of their representative body, the Jewish Agency. To the Palestinians, it was clear that Britain wasn't delivering them independence. It was delivering their country to other people. In 1936, they went on strike. British forces tried to break the strike with arrests, torture, mass punishment, and executions. Leaders were exiled, weapons confiscated, and houses blown up. Palestinian fighters attacked British and Jewish targets, while British and Haganah forces would carry out joint raids on Palestinian villages. Something had to change. The British government sent a commission called the Peel Commission to figure it out, but their proposed solution was typical. Just draw another British line on the map, divide the country, give this part to the Jews and this part to the Palestinians, and make that part of Transjordan next door. Oh, and because the Palestinians were a majority in the country, 250,000 of them would have to be removed by force to make the Jewish state viable. Remember, these were the proposals that were meant to calm things down. Spoiler, they didn't. Instead, the revolt continued until 1939, by which time about 10% of Palestine's adult male population had either been killed, injured, arrested, or exiled. The British government really needed a solution. So, here comes another report.
The Commission is studying the 20-year-old Jewish settlements in British-mandated Palestine.
The 1939 White Paper created a conflict between the British and the Zionists for the first time, because it rejected partition and said the solution was for Palestine to gain independence within 10 years, with everyone living there sharing it together. Crucially, it also imposed severe limits on Jewish land purchases and immigration. To the Zionists, this felt like a betrayal. In response, some set off bombs across the country, killing dozens of Palestinians. But soon, everyone was distracted by something much bigger. More than 60 million people were killed in World War II, including 6 million Jews murdered in Nazi death camps. Jewish survivors fled Europe, with a large number of them trying to find safety in Palestine despite the British limit on Jewish immigration. This set off a more direct confrontation between the Zionists and the British, with Palestinians often targeted as well. The Zionists knew two things. Militarily, they were stronger than the Palestinians, and Britain was exhausted by World War II, so it wouldn't have the stomach to keep fighting in Palestine. They were right. In 1947, after 30 years of occupation, Britain announced it was quitting Palestine and asked the newly formed United Nations to clean up its mess. Alright, 1947 and 1948 are the most pivotal years in this story, so let's take a look at how things are lining up. During British rule, Jews had gone from 10% to 30% of the population, and owned about 6% of the land. Under Ben-Gurion's leadership, the Jewish Agency was pretty much functioning as a government for the Jewish community. And the Zionist militias had tens of thousands of soldiers, modern weapons, and officers who'd already fought in World War II. On the other side, the Palestinians hadn't been allowed to develop their own administration or military. But as they waited for the UN's solution, they were still the majority all over the country. In November 1947, the UN, then only made up of a fraction of the world's countries, voted to partition Palestine. This plan marked off 55% of the country for a Jewish state, but the UN never explained how it could be a Jewish state when half the people in its territory were Palestinian. To nobody's surprise, Palestinians, and in fact all Arabs, rejected the UN's plan. Ben-Gurion and the Zionist leadership accepted, but they saw an opportunity. With the British on the way out, the Zionists knew they would have the strongest military in Palestine. Their forces were instructed to seize more territory than they'd been awarded by the UN and to do what was necessary to reduce the number of Palestinians in it. In cities like Haifa, the militia set off car bombs in Palestinian neighborhoods. They attacked villages and forced residents out.
Haganah troops have driven the Arabs out of the beleaguered city, taking many prisoners.
After inspecting parts of western Jerusalem that had been emptied of Palestinians, Ben-Gurion said,
"In many Arab neighborhoods in the West, you do not see even one Arab. If we persist, it is quite possible that in the next 6 or 8 months there will be considerable changes in the country, and to our advantage."
One of the events that helped speed up these changes took place on April 9th, 1948, when the village of Dir Yassin was attacked. A British government report to the United Nations describes the scene. 250 people were killed in circumstances of great savagery. Women and children were stripped, lined up, photographed, and then slaughtered by automatic firing. The story of what happened at Dir Yassin set off panic all over the country. As news spread, people fled, fearing they would be next. Historians have recorded dozens of similar massacres during this period. Each time, they would result in entire communities fleeing.
תמיד הייתה הוראה, והייתה הוראה של בן גוריון, לגרש את האנשים משם. כבשנו את המקום, טרקטורים חרשו את המקום. חרשו. לא נשאר זכר של כבר. למה? לא רצו שתהיה, לא חזרה ולא זכר של המקום.
By the time Britain ended its mandate on May 15th, 1948, 250,000 Palestinians had fled. The night before, David Ben-Gurion announced the founding of the State of Israel, with himself as its first prime minister. He was standing under a giant portrait of Herzl, 51 years after Herzl had predicted this very moment. The Zionist militias came together as the newly formed Israel Defense Forces, but the fighting wasn't over. With the British out of the way, soldiers from several Arab countries entered Palestine. But the Israeli army was better equipped, better organized, and unlike the Arab armies, had a unified command and backing from several European countries. Israeli forces pushed into places that the UN had assigned to the Palestinian state, like the towns of Lidda and Ramle. 50,000 people were forced to flee from there, many on foot, in what became known as the Lidda Death March. After being emptied, the towns were given Hebrew names, Lod and Ramla. Like in many other emptied towns, the buildings and homes were taken over by the new Israeli state and given to Jews. By the time the UN secured an armistice, 3/4 of the Palestinian people had become refugees. In Arabic, they call this the Nakba, literally the catastrophe. The new state of Israel made up 78% of what had been Palestine. The remaining parts were annexed by Jordan or taken over by Egypt. A year later, the UN passed a resolution calling for all Palestinian refugees to be allowed to return home. They never have been. Palestine had been erased. In the decades since, attempts to resolve this conflict have again tried to partition the land. With each successive attempt, the territory offered to Palestinians in their historic homeland shrinks even more. Ironically, Israel is still struggling to maintain the population advantage it gained in 1948 when it forced all those people out, because in 1967, it occupied the West Bank and Gaza, bringing all the Palestinians living there under its rule. And so today, the population of Jews and non-Jews in this land is roughly equal. But those living under occupation have no rights, no citizenship, and no prospect of independence. The Nakba-era tactics of settlement, home demolitions, and expulsion are still used against them.
Nakba, Nakba, no! We want Nakba, Nakba, no!
Israel has taken the land but wants nothing to do with the millions under its rule. International, Israeli, and Palestinian human rights groups say this system is a form of apartheid. To see if that's an accurate description of Israel more than 100 years after Balfour's promise, watch this video here.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi. Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
They came here to attack Arabs.
You're watching Jewish Israelis, some armed with baseball bats, headed in the direction of a mosque.
Local Jews marked Arab houses in a red spray, so the ones who come from outside will recognize our houses and attack us. ISIS did it, and the Nazis did it. And now they are doing it for us.
This is the city of Lid, or Lod, as it's been known since Israeli forces took control of it in 1948.
هذه النكبة ما إلهاش مثيل طلعونا برا.
It's one of just a handful of binational cities where Palestinians and Jewish Israelis live together. Residents here told us that right-wing Jewish settlers are moving into Arab-majority neighborhoods in a deliberate effort to dilute the population.
We want the Palestinians to accept this is our land, this is our country, this is our city.
In the aftermath of a violent crackdown, new levels of mistrust and generational trauma are haunting its victims. We're in Lid to find out how Palestinians are challenging Israel's de facto policy of divide and rule while demanding freedom from systemic oppression.
The minute that set everything and the police lost it is when an Arab boy climbed that electric pole over there and he moved the Israel flag and he put instead a Palestinian flag.
For activist Ghassan Munayir, massive protests this spring signaled a kind of reawakening for the descendants of Palestinians who resisted efforts to violently force them out in 1948.
Inside Israel, we are Palestinians too. They tried all their best to tear us from our people and our nationality and our identity. They failed.
What happened next was several days of violence. 2 men were killed. One was Jewish and the other Palestinian.
يا الله ما اقدرش امرق من عنده هذا الكيكار ما اقدرش كل ما امرق من جنبه مش بكتم على نفسي والله العظيم احساس مخيف.
Marwa Hassune's husband Musa was just a few minutes from home when he got caught up in protests that turned deadly.
هون قتلوه هون وين ما انا واقفه بالضبط.
The father of 3 children was shot dead after a settler fired his gun at protesters.
المستوطنين شايف هدول البنايات اللي غاد هدول بنوهم للمستوطنين عملوا لهم حاره لإلهم خصوصي إلهم.
Religious settlers have been moving into Lid from the occupied West Bank for over a decade with resources and support from the state. Their group is called the Gerin Torani, or Torah Seeds in English. They're expanding their community into Arab neighborhoods with the express goal of establishing a Jewish majority. Marwa visits her husband's grave daily with her family.
أحلى أيام حياتي شفتها معه أحلى أيام حياتي كل يوم أحلى من اللي قبله.
Suspects were detained in Musa's killing but released shortly after. Marwa says it's a testament to the ways Palestinians are treated differently by the justice system.
أكيد روحته على الدار لأنه هو يهودي واللي مات عربي فلو كان العكس القاتل هو عربي واللي انقتل يهودي فأكيد ما كانوش رح يروحوه.
Palestinians with Israeli citizenship face dozens of discriminatory laws that limit economic opportunity, restrict their movements, and deny them access to their land. And they live in a climate of pervasive fear and punishment. But Marwa and her family are determined to fight back.
ولو صار في أنا العكس كان موسى أكيد بسكتش عشاني وأنا مش رح أسكت عشانه. أنا بوعده أكيد أنا مش رح أسكت عشانه لموسى. والقاتل رح ينحكم.
For Marwa's 6-year-old daughter Mila, what's left is hopelessness and confusion.
حابة إني أعيش معاه بس هذا أبرة. هو كان زلمة طيب كان يهتم فينا كلنا مش بس فيه كان هو يحبنا وأنا كتير هلأ مشتاقة له بعرفش شو أسوي هلأ بس مرة شفناه لما كان لابس أبيض
لما ودعنا
بعدين بابا راح ما قدرتش أفهم يعني إيش عم بيقولوا وأنا بعدين ما قدرتش
شكرا حبيبتي ما تخافيش. اشتقتي له؟
أنا كنت أسمع لبابا.
حبيبتي الغالية، تحبي ماما أنت صح؟
The Hassouneh family is one of the oldest indigenous Palestinian families in Lid, who, like so many others, were forcibly expelled during the 1948 creation of Israel.
هذه النكبة ما إلهاش مثيل، طلعونا برا. هيك.
Musa's great-uncle, Ramadan, survived the Nakba, or catastrophe. That's when over 750,000 Palestinians were violently forced out of their homes.
New Jewish state is born in the tense atmosphere of civil war.
أنا لما قامت الدولة سنة 48 ب 11/7 بقى عمري 16 سنة ونص.
In Lid, more than 200 men, women, and children were murdered as they sought refuge in the Dahmesh Mosque. Ramadan recounts what happened afterward.
الساعة 3 آخر النهار سقطت البلد بيد القوات الإسرائيلية. بقت الحكومة الإسرائيلية ما تسمحش لحد يرجع.
Some 50,000 people in the city became refugees overnight. Historical accounts called it a death march.
طلعنا ماشي من هين لنعليل والطريق ما بقتش يعني مش طريق. بقى شهر رمضان أنا أفطرت ما قدرت أصوم.
After a few years, Ramadan's family found a way back to Lid. The city's name was changed to Lod, and their farming community was now jobless and completely dependent on the Jewish state that had taken their land.
فكنا قاعدين ببيت مش إلنا. الشغل كان صعب. فيش شغل. يعني تجيب معك مصاري ليرة زي شيء كبير.
And until 1966, they continued to live under military rule in virtual ghettos, surrounded by barbed wire because they were considered a threat. By the time they were granted Israeli citizenship, the state had taken away pretty much everything they had. Jewish Israeli resident Yigal Yehoshua was the other victim of deadly demonstrations in Lid. Yigal's brother Efi showed up at the Hassouneh family home to offer his sympathy.
כואב הלב, באמת כואב הלב. עזבי, אנחנו בני אדם. ועל כל בן אדם שנרצח, בכלל בעולם או בארץ הזו, כואב לי. איך לאנשים אין רחמנות? לא ליהודים, לא לערבים, לא לנוצרים, לא משנה מאיזה ארץ. לאנשים אין לב.
For Palestinians, it's not a question of just getting along or achieving coexistence. It's about living alongside Jewish Israelis who refuse to recognize the brutality of their past and current experiences.
אתה רואה בכביש אנשים עצבניים, אחד נכנס בשני, אחד חותך בשני. אני אומר, למה?
כמה זמן אתה נמצא?
אני?
כמה שנים?
יותר ממך.
יפה מאוד.
אני כמעט 60 שנה ואני חייתי בעיר הזו,
אז אתה יודע טוב מאוד מי תושבי לוד ואיך אנחנו חיים ביחד שנים. למה זה קרה בתקופה האחרונה?
הכל טוב, אבל צריך לא להתסיס את העניינים.
During filming, thousands of right-wing extremists marched through East Jerusalem, waving flags and celebrating the day in 1967 when Israel occupied the city. The crowd cheered as one Palestinian counter-protester was pulled away by his neck. As police dragged away a Palestinian woman, a group of youth shouted,
We want the Palestinians that said, this is our land, this is our country, this is our city. And then if they want to live here, they can to live in peace and don't have problems for nothing.
As new housing projects for hardline Jewish settlers persist, Lid's mayor has been accused of emboldening their growth with discriminatory policies and anti-Arab rhetoric. A few years ago, he barged into the Dahmesh Mosque, the same site where Palestinians were massacred during the Nakba, and demanded they lower the volume. At an Arab primary school, parents say armed members of the Gerin Torani stormed the property and demanded the school turn over its playground to the city so it could be used as a tourist walkway.
الصبح قلت لها بدك تروحي المدرسة مدرستنا والأرض أرضنا
Incidents like this have signaled a new level of aggression that Palestinians in the city haven't seen before. Armed extremist Jewish Israelis trying to enforce their own rule and order. AJ Plus requested an interview with the Gerin Torani. They didn't reply to our request.
Democracy without equality doesn't exist. What we see here is apartheid.
Ghassan showed us a 10-foot wall on the north side of the city that separates a wealthy, thriving Jewish neighborhood from a poor, struggling Arab one.
The building of this wall reflects how the Jewish majority looks at us. They don't want to see us. So we build walls in order not to see you and not to see your miserable life and your misery. Most of the Arabs in Lod are second and third generation of 1948 refugees. We will not leave this place. We will not leave this place. This is our homeland. This is my city.
As Marwa and her family are left to confront new layers of trauma, she responds to Yigal's brother Effie in fluent Hebrew.
אנחנו צריכים להרגיע את שני הצדדים, שאם אתם רוצים לחיות ביחד, צריך להרגיע. לא לחפש טריגר, סיבה, לריב. אני לא אחפש איתו סיבה לריב. כי שנייה אחת, גפרור אחד, אני מדליק אותו. הוא יירגע, הוא יירגע אם אנחנו נדבר בהיגיון, בנועם, בנחת, אני והוא, נכון. זה ככה יהיה, אם לא, אנחנו נלך לקיצוני ימני או קיצוני שמאלי או קיצוני...
אבל זה כבר מאוחר מה שאנחנו. יירגע אחרי מה? אחרי שבית שלם נהרס, אחרי שיש לו 3 יתומים שבלי אבא.
יפה.
א' כל...
מסכים איתך.
הרוצח יקבל את העונש שלו, ואז נדבר על מה שאתה אומר.
אני לא מחכה לרוצח.
מה שאתה אומר, אתה אומר 100%.
זה רק יסגור לי מעגל עם נמצאת.
This group, Lava, the dangerous time is when small groups are walking around and want to find Arab people to attack them.
Some people have said that members of your group may harass Arab residents.
אנחנו נמצאים פה בשביל להסביר לבנות שלא ילכו עם ערבים ובשביל לשמור שהערבים לא יתחילו עם הבנות שלנו. אנחנו לא פועלים באלימות. כל יום דוקרים פה יהודים. אנחנו שומרים שהיהודים לא יפחדו.
It became really dangerous to be an Arab man or woman in this center city. We decided to be here to make sure that nothing really bad is happening.
You followed them at night time?
Yes, when they understand that we are videoing what they're doing, sometimes they're attacking. And I have once really attacked by a big group. In the end, someone in the crowd shout, "Stop, he's a Jewish," and they stopped.
Do you feel like you need to take the law into your own hands?
We're doing what they didn't do. If they see Arabs that look to a Jewish girl, they didn't do nothing. But my people tell him to don't do it.
I'm part of an Israeli group called Speaking in the Square that can talk about politics in a more complex way, which in Israel doesn't really exist right now. We've been here for the past year and a half since last summer. So a lot of the talking is with Lehava kids. When the adults are here, they really try to keep them away from talking to us. They're inciting and brainwashing kids who have nowhere else to go.
They don't represent mainstream Israeli.
Not mainstream Israeli.
But a significant minority.
A minority. I think that a lot of people who maybe have similar ideals or similar political or maybe the right wing or the extreme right are still not violent when it comes to it. And this group, unfortunately, is sometimes.
Do you think that your views represent a large section of Israeli society?
אנחנו הרוב, רוב העם איתנו.
So you would argue that because it's also Jewish law that only Jews can marry Jews, that actually a majority of people in Israel believe in what you do?
We do what all the people here think.
Do you feel safe in Jerusalem?
We just need people that don't agree to become part of this violence.
Here! Get the out of the country! This is Jewish country only! We don't need Muslims here!
In northern Israel, a Catholic parade thanks God for protecting the image of Virgin Mary. Today, it's these Christians who feel they need protection.
These extremists, whether Muslim, whether Jews, is raising more and more.
We are afraid because there was an escalation, very dangerous escalation.
That escalation is of hate crimes against Christians in Israel. In this Jerusalem church, the words "Jesus is garbage" was scrawled on the side wall. At the Vatican's Jerusalem headquarters, recent graffiti threatened death to Arabs and Christians and all those who hate Israel. The church believes the perpetrators are ultra-nationalist Orthodox Jews. Outside the site, believed to be both King David's tomb and the Last Supper room, they protest a rumor the building will be handed over to the Vatican.
If someone will give up 1 inch from that tomb, they'll start a war between Jews and Christians. God forgive us.
Israeli police must protect everyone equally, and they say they're trying to protect Christians.
Action has been taken in the past by police operations as well as undercover operations, not just the Israeli National Police, but also secret security services who have also been involved. That's how seriously we're taking and dealing with those incidents.
But the church believes this isn't only about police. The Holy Land's top Catholic official says some Israeli schools teach hate. Some Israeli politicians preach exclusion. As the Pope arrives, some Christians living in what they consider the holiest place on earth say they feel neither welcome nor protected.
بنواجه تطرف للأسف ديني اللي بتفرجي فعلا خطاب كراهية واضح على القليل أنا بحكي هون بهالموقع للمسيحيين في مدينة القدس، وهذا إشي إحنا بنرفضه رفضا كاملا.
Trying to push and pull that cross down. Yep, he's just pushing it right now.
الفكرة هي إنه الناس الموجودين عايشين مع بعض إن كان من الديانات الإبراهيمية الثلاث إنهم يعرفوا كيف يعيشوا مع بعض باحترام، واحترام كمان حرية العبادة والمقدسات أهم شيء. هذا هو مطلبنا، إحنا مش طالبين لا عجائب ولا طالبين أشياء اللي هي مستحيلة.
comments on Israel? We're asking everybody today. Any comments
Tell
on
them to
Israel?
get the hell out of Palestine.
Ooh. Any better comments than that?
Remember, these people are occupied, and it's their land. It's not German, it's not Poland.
So where should they go? What should they do?
They go home.
Where's the home?
Poland.
So the Jews,
Germany.
You think Jews go back to Poland and Germany?
And America and everywhere else.
California only has 100 Ethiopian Jews, including Samu and his family. Arriving at the age of 3, Esther, now 40, tells us about her school career in Beverly Hills.
I went to a Jewish private school from about 5 years old until I was about 14, right before high school. It was interesting. I was the only black girl there. Everybody else was white around me. I remember that there was a rabbi in our school. Actually, he was a substitute teacher, and he came for the day. And I remember coming back from recess, and he stopped me in front of everybody, and he said, "Stop, what are you doing here?" And being an 8-year-old or 7-year-old, I think during that time, what would somebody answer? Of course, I go to school here. And he said, "Well, you're not supposed to be here." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you're black." I think that's one of the moments when I actually realized that I was different from everybody else. I mean, I knew I was different, but I also knew that I was color different.
Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the ties between Israel and the American Jewish establishment are very strong, and they are strong in this country. As you know, they have power, which it's okay. They are talented people, and they have power, money, and media, and other things. And their attitude is Israel, my country, right or wrong, the identification. And they are not ready to hear criticism. And it's very easy to blame people who criticize certain acts of the Israeli government as anti-Semitics, and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people, and that justify everything we do to the Palestinians.
What do you imagine a response is to something if people perceive anti-Semitism in
what
all, Kyrie Irving posts,
right,
or what Kanye says, or what Dave said on Saturday night? What do you think a good response
first of all,
would be?
I think just reflexively naming things anti-Semitism is as reductive as some of the things that they might be saying. It immediately shuts down a conversation. Dave said something in the SNL monologue that I thought was instructive as well, which he says it shouldn't be this hard to talk about things. And that is what we're talking about. Look, I can't pretend that there aren't a ton of people in this country and this world who believe that the Jews have an unreasonable amount of control over the systems, and they wield it as puppet masters. I'm called anti-Semitic because I'm against Israel's treatment of Palestinians. I'm called other things from other people based on other opinions that I have. But those shut down debate. If we don't have the wherewithal to meet each other with what's reality, then how do we move forward?
Actor Jamie Foxx apologized over the weekend after a post that he put up on Instagram led to accusations of anti-Semitism. I'm going to show you the post and then we'll get to the explanations. He had posted this. "They killed this dude named Jesus. What do you think they'll do to you? Hashtag fake friends, hashtag fake love." Now, those hashtags are super relevant, and we'll get to why in just a moment. But I can also understand why he received backlash for that. So the interpretation was that Fox's post promoted the idea of Jewish deicide, described as the charge that Jews bear eternal responsibility for the death of Jesus Christ, per the American Jewish Committee. Fox was dragged over the coals, so a wider frame, a newsletter that says it aims to provide a better overall understanding and scope of Jewish world news, shared Fox's original post and called called it horrifically anti-Semitic. Actor Jennifer Aniston then reposted a wider frame after she said that she came under fire for seeming to have liked his post.
Saturday Night Live is being slammed for host Dave Chappelle's monologue and his comments about the Jewish community. On Sunday, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, wrote on Twitter, "We shouldn't expect Dave Chappelle to serve as society's moral compass, but disturbing to see SNL not just normalize but popularize anti-Semitism. Why are Jewish sensitivities denied or diminished at almost every turn? Why does our trauma trigger applause?" Meanwhile, the Jerusalem Post tweeted, "The American comedian Dave Chappelle said during his SNL monologue that he denounces anti-Semitism in all its forms, before promptly engaging in anti-Semitic tropes." Before the monologue, Chappelle unfolded a piece of paper that read, "I denounce anti-Semitism in all its forms, and I stand with my friends in the Jewish community." He then added this.
"And that, Kanye, is how you buy yourself some time."
The monologue included Chappelle saying that Ye had, quote, broken the show business rules.
You know, the rules of perception. If they're black, then it's a gang. If they're Italian, it's a mob. But if they're Jewish, it's a coincidence, and you should never speak about it.
He later said this.
"I've been in Hollywood. This was just what I saw. It's a lot of Jews."
The comedian added he understood how somebody could, quote, adopt the delusion that Jewish people run show business.
It's not a crazy thing to think, but it's a crazy thing to say out loud in a climate like this.
The Hollywood Reporter has reached out to NBC for comment. For more on this story, go to thr.com. This is the Hollywood Reporter News.
Israel's Prime Minister has pledged to curb harassment and discrimination after complaints over the behaviour of ultra-Orthodox Jews. Police intervened when this TV crew was set upon by one group as the journalists investigated a case of alleged abuse. Their car was stoned, a reporter wounded, and equipment stolen. The town of Beit Shemesh near Jerusalem is under the spotlight after an 8-year-old girl complained of being threatened by ultra-Orthodox men over her dress. The graffiti says, "Israeli women, the Torah demands that you dress modestly."
We'll just walk a little bit, okay?
Nama Margolese says she's been spat at on the way to school.
Do you want to walk just a little bit? No. No?
Activists have also been challenging cases of gender segregation on public transport. They've started openly defying a tradition which sees women sit in the back of the bus. The head of an ultra-Orthodox group in Jerusalem defends the practice. A kosher woman is first of all judged by her modesty, he says. If she's sitting in the rear of a bus, there's no shame, no humiliation. It doesn't mean she's less worthy. She's simply being modest. This is the behaviour of a real Jewish woman. Last week saw a demonstration against segregation and calling for more visibility for women in Israel. The ultra-Orthodox make up about 10% of the population, but their influence has been growing. The mayor of Beit Shemesh has estimated that up to 50 people have been involved in the abuse of the 8-year-old.
A CBS News investigation has uncovered a loophole that allows accused and convicted American pedophiles to escape justice by moving to Israel. So Ian Lee has been following this for more than a year, and he traveled to Israel for this investigation. He worked with a group that tracks people accused of sex crimes, which estimates dozens of Americans have used this loophole.
So, he's 6'2".
We are on a stakeout looking for this man, Jimmy Julius Caro, 48 years old and wanted on charges of sexually assaulting a 9-year-old girl in Oregon back in 2000 and a 5-year-old girl in Israel in 2001. He's considered dangerous. But these photos are a few years old, so we don't know if he'll look the same. He remains elusive. Previous attempts to capture him have failed.
Obviously, the fear that he would somehow figure out that anyone's looking for him and bolt. He just called his number.
Shauna Aronson got a tip that Caro's expected at this clinic near Tel Aviv.
Who's going to call the
She's
police?
with JCW, Jewish Community Watch, an organization that hunts down accused pedophiles who flee to Israel from the U.S., exploiting a process called Law of Return, whereby any Jewish person can move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship. The ease with which pedophiles seem able to use this law as an escape route haunts victims like Mendy Hawk, who says he was abused from age 8 by a teacher at an Orthodox Jewish school in Los Angeles. So your classroom is right here. How does it feel being back?
I was very anxious and, stressed coming back here. And a lot of memories coming through my mind.
Memories of his alleged abuser, Mordechai Yom Tov, who taught him Hebrew studies when he was just 8 years old.
So in the beginning, he would just rub me like outside of my pants, and then I would say about 3 to 4 months later, he started going like in.
Reaching down your pants?
Yeah, it's reaching down.
Why did you feel like you couldn't tell anyone?
I was scared, I was ashamed. I just didn't know what people would think of me with the whole situation.
Yom Tov pled guilty in 2002 to sexually abusing and committing lewd acts against 3 other boys. He served jail time, but when he was released, he violated his probation and, according to JCW, fled to Israel with help from individuals within the Orthodox Jewish community. JCW tracked Yom Tov down and confronted him with a hidden camera in Jerusalem, where he admitted to illegally fleeing the United States with help and using a fake passport to enter Israel.
I was supposed to stay for 5 years in the same city. I was supposed to, training on the side of sort of thing. I was supposed to go every 2 weeks to the police station. I left within a week later.
He had this message for his victims.
I'm very, 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 very sorry.
The other person in this video is Meir Seawald, the founder of Jewish Community Watch. He tells CBS News Yom Tov's case isn't uncommon in the Orthodox community.
The same thing that's going on in the Catholic Church right now around the world, the exact same thing happens in our community. The rabbis say it's, you know what, he promised he's going to go for therapy, he's never going to do it again. Boom, he's in another community. A few years later, he's at the same thing, and we hear more allegations that the person continued to abuse children.
And often, those abusers end up in Israel. Rabbi Yehuda Oppenheimer says he unwittingly helped Caro escape.
There was nothing that raised any red flags up to the point where he was moving to Israel.
Well, I wish I could say that, but unfortunately I can't say that. So he had violated his parole, and now they were looking for him. He said that there was something in the past that had happened when he was young, but nothing had ever happened since. I've changed and I'm a different person now, but you gotta help me. I felt that I could trust him. So I wrote him a letter, and he bought a ticket, and he left.
Caro is accused of abusing more children when he got to Israel.
What was that like for you when you found that out?
Punch to the gut. It was very painful.
Rabbi Oppenheimer says the reason he came forward is to shine a light on the process of accused pedophiles fleeing, to help ensure it doesn't happen again. Back at the stakeout, an ambulance pulls up and a man steps out. It's Caro.
That was definitely him. Oh my God. Okay.
The police are called and eventually arrive. His days on the run are over as he's led away.
Did you assault the girl in the United States? No. Did you flee Israel because you assaulted the girl in the United States? Have you ever assaulted any girls in Israel? Do you know that you're wanted by Interpol?
Yeah.
There's relief as police escort him to their car. This marks the end to a months-long manhunt.
Oh my gosh! Can I give you a hug? I have something I need to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay. We found him, and he was just arrested.
What?
He was just arrested.
Thank you. Wow, oh my gosh.
Amuna, not her real name, is the person on the other end of the line. She was a little girl when Caro entered her life.
I was 4 or 5 years old. My mother was on bed rest. My father's a rabbi, so he wasn't really home. He used to come to our house. We used to play games, and then it became sexual. I'm going to give you a cookie because you do it so nicely. It's all about the cookie. It's all about lying, and it's all about being so evil to a little child. He also threatened me he would kill my parents, he would choke me, he would hold me, he would kidnap me.
How did that affect you?
A lot! Yeah. It affected my whole life. My whole life is around this sexual abuse and rape. Yeah.
Amuna turned to therapy and art to help deal with the trauma.
This is in my bedroom and my inspiration.
She paints and writes poetry, but she's still angry that it was allowed to happen in the first place.
What are your thoughts on him being able to come to Israel and flee the United States?
It brings up a lot of anger and a lot of frustration towards the Israeli system.
Shauna says the failure begins in the U.S.
Why would someone want to help one of these pedophiles escape?
Oftentimes there's some sort of community incentive. Either somebody owes them a favor, or someone in the community, let's say an institution, has covered up for them in the past, and they know that if this goes to court, there's a lot of civil liability coming down the line, and it's going to cost a lot of money to a lot of people, and nobody wants to deal with that.
Shauna accuses the Israeli police of not prioritizing accused pedophiles on the run.
Why do you have to be the ones that do this?
Because nobody else is. I don't have any better answer than that.
And if you guys weren't doing it?
Then nobody would do it.
Israeli police told CBS News that, quote, the police coordinate closely with the Ministry of Justice and worldwide police organizations in order to find suspects overseas. Today, Caro faces charges in Israel, while back in the United States, the district attorney's office in Clackamas County in Oregon told CBS News they are working with federal authorities to secure his extradition. But Mordechai Yom Tov remains at large. The district attorney here in Los Angeles told us they have not requested Yom Tov's extradition and that they had no other comment. Jewish Community Watch says that is the problem. If American officials don't try to get accused pedophiles from Israel, then they simply escape justice and leave children at risk. The U.S. Department of Justice declined to comment on specific cases, but praised their relationship with Israel's law enforcement, adding sex offenders have been successfully extradited in the past. Days after Caro's arrest, Amuna confronted him at an Israeli police station.
It was good. It was good to confront him. It was important for me to have that closure in my life.
The healing process will continue for Amuna, but for many, like Mendy, the lack of justice means the pain continues.
So there are two things JCW says could help close this pathway. First, better background checks on people moving to Israel. And second, more willingness from U.S. authorities to pursue the accused.
So it certainly seems like law enforcement, both here and in Israel, are sort of busy patting themselves on the back on how well they cooperate with one another. But Jewish Community Watch seems to be doing most of that grunt work, that on the ground investigating. Why do they say, the group, why do they say more pedophiles aren't being apprehended?
So it's very complicated when you leave the United States and go to Israel. First, they say that once these people are wanted, that they need to go to Interpol and have that international arrest warrant put out for them so that the Israeli authorities can then start looking for them. Extradition is expensive, and a lot of these jurisdictions just don't have the money or manpower to really pursue them. And then when you get to the Israeli side, JCW says that they need to be doing more background checks on these people. Sometimes a simple Google search will bring up, especially if it's an Interpol arrest warrant, will bring that up, and so that they can then know this person is dangerous, they should not be let in, or if there is an arrest warrant out for them, that they need to go and pick them up. And JCW says that there just isn't the priority to go and pick these people up, that the police don't have the resources there to go and look for these people as well. So it really does fall on JCW to track them from the United States to Israel.
That's unbelievable. Does JCW also sort of believe that aside from law enforcement, there are sort of other elements of the community that need to work on this?
Yeah, and that's another big part of this, is that a lot of the times these people have help. And help within the community, people that help them flee to Israel. Sometimes, as we saw with Yom Tov, he had help, according to JCW, to flee the country through Mexico and then get a passport, a fake passport there to immigrate to Israel. So
these are elaborate schemes.
They are, and they need a lot of people to pull off. And they say that there needs to be a conversation within the community about not protecting people. And that's where what's so important to have Rabbi Oppenheimer, come forward and talk about this and say, this is something that is happening, and we need to address this. And and he said, the one important thing is if someone comes to you, don't be so trusting. Look into their background, especially if there's someone who wants to immigrate very quickly. Take some time to make sure this isn't a person who's trying to flee justice.
Yeah, he was a really good element to your story because sometimes, it's not everyone's bad. They're good people just trying to help out, and they find themselves sort of caught up in a bad situation.
Exactly.
Hey, Ian, it's really nice having you here, too. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
All right.
Very upset.
15-year-old Eli Gross saw the letters SOS spray painted on his school when he got there Thursday morning. His classmates weren't sure what it meant until they saw the other one on the school across the street, Synagogue of Satan.
I was waiting for something to happen because of the atmosphere that's going on in America.
Rabbi Moshe Katzman runs the Chabad of Staten Island out of the building next door. He says the mainly Hasidic community was ready to rally together if the recent string of hateful incidents in the city made it to their doorstep.
The anti-Semitism that's just going on rampage out there, and no one is taking a stand.
But Shmira of Staten Island is. The Jewish Volunteer Safety Patrol took to social media posting this video. A surveillance camera on the yeshiva school captures the moment the vandals struck the Manor Heights neighborhood late Wednesday night. The NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force have launched an investigation into the incident and say this is the suspect they're looking for.
I want these people to become better people. I want them to become good citizens. I don't need them punished as long as they behave properly.
Don't do it ever again.
According to the NYPD, anti-Semitic hate crimes are up 82% in the first 4 months of 2019 compared to the same period last year. And it's for that reason that many of the yeshiva students we spoke to said that they're exercising more caution on their way to and from school. We're live in the Manor Heights section of Staten Island. Tara Jakeway, CBS 2 News.